So Michigan football, common theme, Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, Will Johnson, Donovan Edwards, some of their main key difference makers they're going to have back. It was interesting. One of you guys said that Donovan Edwards was their key difference maker. The bottom line is that it's just going to boil down to consistency for Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards certainly can be that guy, can be in that discussion as one of their key difference makers. He's just got to be more consistent. But Will Johnson is such a legitimate good football player for Michigan. Will Johnson, talk about living up to the hype. Will Johnson came in as, like, there's a lot of five-star guys that haven't necessarily worked out. Like, even Jabril Peppers was really good at Michigan, but it didn't really necessarily project to the NFL. I think the gold star for a five-star guy is a difference maker at the collegiate level and a guy with a skill set that translates to the NFL level. So that's exactly what Will Johnson's been. I talked about this on the last episode. Getting Will Johnson was the finishing touch for what Michigan needed. And what I mean by that is Michigan's done such a good job of hitting on 3-star, 4-star guys. Like, Michigan has been the epitome of getting guys that were considered good high school football players, but Michigan saw them as guys that would project to really good football players. Like Aiden Hutchinson, for example. Aiden Hutchinson, 4-star guy. In Michigan just develops him into an elite player. So Will Johnson was the finishing touch for the national championship because it was Michigan saying, this is a guy in state. This is a 5-star guy. This is a guy that we view highly in our eyes that a lot of teams are really, really want. So let's go get him and let's combine him with McCarthy, Donovan Edwards in the already talented roster we have, talented young core roster we have, and Will Johnson just developed into a shutdown corner. But yeah, so for Michigan, I think Michigan could lose 3 or 4 games. I did kind of find an example of what this Michigan football team is similar to. It is similar. If you rewind, Alabama won the national championship in 2009, but they did return Mark Ingram, Julio Jones, and Dante Hightower. They did return Greg McElroy too, but he wasn't necessarily a difference maker. He was a starter. So and they had 2 total starters back on defense. So Alabama from 2009 to 2010. The 2010 Alabama team is similar to this Michigan team. So Julio Jones, Mark Ingram, Dante Hightower. They did have 3 true difference makers, and they took a step back. They went from 2009 when they won it. What would they have been? 14-0. So 14-0 in 2009 to 2010. They went 10-3, and some people said that was Nick Saban's, maybe his. Don't necessarily want to use the term worse, but probably the lesser of all his teams, and they still went 10-3. So this Michigan team could be like the 2010 Alabama team where they do drop 3 games. And they drop 3 games, and it's 3 tough, hard-fought losses. Like, I think Michigan could lose. I think Michigan could have a season where they lose 3 games, but the 3 losses are to Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas. And they're all, maybe one of them's not very close, but the other 2 are close games. And they're competitive, and they put up points. So, not gonna make that my final prediction, but I could definitely see this as a 9-3 Michigan football team, in an impressive 9-3 team. That's why this goes back to the point where I think the 2025 season, especially the 2026 season, is going to say a lot about Sherrone Moore, because a lot of the same culture for Michigan football is still in place. We're gonna really find out in 2026 when Moore's got more of his recruits. We're gonna see more of what this Michigan program will look like under him, with a lot of guys at that point. Because that's the thing. A couple years after a coach leaves, there's not many guys left that understand that we're still there to remember the winning culture. Like, so, for example, who won the national title 3 years ago. 2021. 2021, Georgia won it all. There's not many players left on that Georgia football team this year that were on that team and remember that culture. Now, that's maybe not the best example because Georgia did win it in 2022. But for example, Alabama won it in 2020. So usually by 2000, so at this point, there's just about no players left that were on that team to remember that winning culture. So 2026 is going to say a lot about the direction how good a coach Sherrone Moore is, the direction of this Michigan program, and are they going to be able to sustain success in the future? The linebacking position will be interesting for Michigan. Hausman, Barnum. Barnum, I forgot the transfer from Maryland. He was a 4-star guy out of high school. Big dude. Think he's going to play mostly the Mike position. Will be lined up on the strong side. But yeah, Hausman played quite a bit last year. There's just a lot of guys that will be interesting for Michigan football. Makari Page, Quentin Johnson, Jair Hill. Jair Hill was a 4-star guy. Jair Hill sounds like there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of praise about him. Once again, a 4-star guy who a lot of Michigan fans in the Michigan coaching staff have high hopes for. So Jair Hill, certainly a guy to keep an eye on. I keep going back to Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Colson Loveland. That's going to be, I've talked about this ad nauseum, but those 3 guys are just going to be such a focal point to Michigan's success. And the defense should be good, though. Wink Martindale did have some really good defenses in Baltimore. I think he's a smart guy. He's had a lot of success. So we'll find out a lot about this Michigan defense under Wink Martindale. It's just there's a lot of changes for Michigan. What's interesting is even though there's a lot of things the same, like Sherrone Moore is going to be the head coach, similar to last year when he was the interim head coach at times. There's a lot of the same, and then there is key players back. So there's a lot of things that are the same, but there are a lot of things that are different. The new defensive coordinator, new defensive schemes. So, and then new Big Ten, new teams, tougher schedule, Ohio State away. So it's interesting. A lot of similarities to last year, but there's a lot of differences as well. So, but yeah, I'm going to wrap at that. Thanks for tuning in to the Brand Partial Show. Stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.